hope is actually the foundation of a lot of these things. Confidence, motivation. Hope is, if you don't have hope that something's possible, you won't actually even believe it or try it, or you won't be motivated. But you can't actually have hope or motivation without, to some degree, a goal, and also the belief that there's a path to achieving it. They call it pathway. There has to be a pathway to getting to where you want to go. And so what I'm hearing is that at some point you saw a pathway.
Hi, my name is Evan Herrman, and I'm documenting my journey on becoming the best version of myself while learning how to be an entrepreneur and developing the successful habits that are necessary to get and keep me there. If you want to come alongside of me and make this journey together, we'll be listening and learning from some of the world's greatest mentors in the areas that matter most: faith, family, finances, friendship, fitness, and fun. So join me on the Whole Person Podcast. Today we have back for the second week in a row, Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Now, here's the thing. This conversation that's taking place with Ben, while you're hearing it from one week to the next week, our conversation has actually spanned from the last time we recorded, which was 4 or 5 months ago, to now. So we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different stuff this time around, but we're still going to be talking about his book as well. I just wanted to give you, the listener, an idea that this just isn't one extended interview, but this has happened several months, well, a lot of months separate, because a lot of stuff has happened in the world and in our lives. And so welcome back to the show, Dr. Benjamin Hardy.
Happy to be back with you, man. Always a pleasure. I was like, when we jumped on Zoom, I'm like, dude, I know you. Are we like? And it's like, no, we did an interview like a few months ago. Like, oh yeah, I was like, I enjoyed that.
Well, I mean, and you're probably getting interviewed how many times a day?
No, I mean, probably like 4. Like I'm definitely shooting to like bomb the world when the book comes out. So they're a little bit more than normal.
And for any FBI, NCIS people listening, he's talking about making the book go viral. You know?
Oh, yeah, seriously, my bad.
No, you're good, man. I'm
and not the type of viral that, because I've used that word in recent past and it hasn't done me so good either. Trying to spread a book, people.
Yeah, not in the midst of COVID, right? Oh man, wow, what a world we're living in right now. It has changed a lot since you and I last talked.
Definitely a little bit different.
So let's just kind of dive right into it. Show your book for everyone again. Personality isn't permanent. Man, I tell you what, I feel like my personality has changed quite a bit over the last 2 months with this COVID thing. Golly. But I just want to jump right into one of the questions that was just kind of curious. Why did you decide to become a psychologist and do the work that you do?
I think I mentioned in our last conversation that I had served a 2-year church mission. That was a really interesting experience for me because when I was on that experience, I got exposed to a lot of things that, frankly, I was just ignorant of. Like, in the former version of myself that was playing video games all day and just kind of lived in a small bubble. Even though I'd gone through a lot of trauma as a young man because of my parents' divorce and my father being a drug addict and just life in general. When I went on my mission and I just was like, going through ghettos and just being in different people's houses and just seeing so many different things. And I read a lot of books and did a lot of journaling. I just like, my brain just like opened immensely to just, a lot that was out there that I was unaware of, seeing people in crazy situations. Also just watching my own growth and change. I'd read a lot of books, done a lot of journaling, a lot of reframing of the past, a lot of watching myself achieve cool goals and building confidence. And so I watched myself change a lot through that experience. And that's really what got me interested in psychology. I was just like, holy cow, like people can change. I also just kind of in interacting with so many different people, I saw a lot of what I believed to be the reasons why people were living in terrible conditions. I would just see people's mindsets, people's surroundings, and it just was really interested in people. So, and I read a lot of cool books by psychologists, while I was on that mission experience. And so I was like, I'm going to go into psychology. I didn't actually know what that would look like down the road. I didn't know if I was going to become a therapist or like a professor, but I was just like, I want to understand psychology and we'll see where this takes me.
Yeah, that's something that in hindsight, it's always 2020, right? I got a degree in theology, and maybe someday I'll be a pastor. I don't know. But looking back, I was just like, man, if I had to do it over again, I probably would have picked psychology as my major versus local church pastor, because local church pastor has done nothing for me post-graduation except, lot of debt.
The cool part is you could always, if you wanted to do graduate work in psychology, you could even with your current bachelor. Like, I know a lot of people, for example, who go back to psychology or their bachelor's in psychology and they go into becoming a pastor, or they go into business, they go into becoming a medical doctor. So like the bachelor honestly doesn't matter.
Very true. No, you're absolutely right. I hate school though.
Yeah, don't go back then.
So it's one of those, it's like school and I just never did well. And so for me to graduate with a graduate degree was like,
that's pretty impressive. That's a big thing.
So just for reference, because a lot of people don't know this, I, believe it or not, I think from like third or fourth grade, I was in special ed. And now special ed is different, I guess, nowadays than what it was when I was young, because now special ed is more of a mentally challenged terminology, I think. But for when I was going through it, it was just severe learning disabilities, like struggling with reading or writing, comprehension. Those were some of the things that I struggled with. And so when I graduated high school, I had a 7th grade reading level.
Holy cow.
So imagine, now when I went into college, I didn't have a 7th grade mindset, but I had a 7th grade reading level. So imagine throwing a 7th grader's abilities into college. And that was really challenging, but I graduated in 4 years. I got a lot of help.
How did you get through it with, just wondering, given the challenge that it was, what allowed you to persist and endure?
Several things. Well, I think the thing that helped me endure was this idea that I wanted to be a pastor. And
makes so much sense, dude.
Yeah. And like, I wanted to be a pastor and I needed to get a degree in theology. And because of that desire, that got me through college. And so, looking back again, like hindsight's 2020, if I wanted to be a psychologist, that might have been a little different, or I might have not had as much passion, but I just really felt this call to be a pastor. And so hell or high water, I was going to do this. And so I remember starting, like when I started college, a lot of my classes for the first year didn't mean jack, because I was in 100 classes. They counted as elective classes, but they didn't count anything towards actually accomplishing a degree. And so once I started getting into normal work, I got a lot of tutoring. I got a lot of help. I had one teacher give me a D in math. Like, it was a gift. It was an absolute gift. But I showed up. I showed up for tutoring. I did everything I was supposed to do. And then there was just some also thinking outside the box. There was this one time I had a teacher where her tests were fill in the blank. And you didn't get a word choice to choose from on the side. It was, you just had to know the material and had to have it memorized, which was not my thing. And because it took me longer to take tests and to read and to comprehend, I got to take tests in an isolated room. And I just remember reading through this test, and I just started crying. I was like, I don't know any of this stuff, but I know I've learned stuff. And I was like, God, what do I do? I don't want to fail. And then I just felt him say, Evan, just write an essay on the back of the test of everything you've learned. So I did. I handed it in, and she gave me a B. And so, but here's the kicker, since we're talking the full story here.
I love it.
The summer of 2008, God radically changed my life. I was supposed to go to the Czech Republic and Romania on a missions trip. And I just felt him tell me to stay. Don't go. And it didn't make sense to me. But if I would have dropped out or my team would have gotten canceled. That trip would have gotten canceled because then we went from 4 people, which was the minimum number you could have to go on a trip, to them only having 3. So then I would have ruined it for everyone. Okay. And so, but I really felt God say, don't go. And I'm just like, oh no, what do I do? So I told my team leader, I'm not going. They were mad. You're not hearing God. But I knew I was hearing God. I stayed back, and the church that I was attending bought a snow cone shack for that summer, basically for me to work in, so I would have a job and I could stay. And then they sold it like in the fall, which was really cool of them to do that. And so this was before smartphones. So I sat in a snow cone shack 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day doing snow cones. And a lot of it was downtime. And so I didn't know what to do. And a lot of my stuff was in storage for the summer. So I just read books and I read my Bible. And I read John, the book of John, 4 times, because every time I finished it, I was like, all right, God, what do you want me to read next? And so I kept rereading John. And through that process, the love of God went from something I knew in my head to something I knew in my heart. And then healing happened in the areas of educational disability, I guess, or struggle. I went from having a hard time being able to read to reading extremely well. I went from not being able to retain information to retaining information, to listen to a teacher speak and being able to remember it and write it down. Because, I was so bad at spelling that when they were speaking, I'd be trying to figure out how to spell words and I'd be missing what they were saying. And it was really funny because I remember I was sitting in ethics class, and this is when I knew, oh my God, God healed me. Was a couple days into ethics class, the teacher was painting this picture and some stuff, like just this idea. I raised my hand and I said, so is it kind of like, and I don't remember the concept, it's been 12 years, but I was like, I can kind of see you moving this way with what you're saying. And it sounded ridiculous, but that's kind of what I imagined. And the whole class erupted in laughter at me. I felt about a half an inch small inside. And I was just like, oh, and I shriveled. And then the teacher looked at the class and he's like, how dare you guys? How dare you? That is exactly where I'm going. And how dare you treat someone that way? Because we were in ethics. It was crazy. And it was at that moment that I realized that healing had taken place in my life. That being said, I have 2 kids, 1 on the way, a career, and a podcast. I'm probably not going to go back to school right now.
Dude, I love it. Your story is so cool. The one thing that I liked personally, and I liked all of it, but the thing that stuck out to me is the idea that you were going to become a pastor was the reason you went through all of the ups and downs. Because, I think we talked about it when we talked last. Maybe we didn't, but during the month of April, I read Man's Search for Meaning twice. Have you read that book?
I don't.
Dude, put it on your list, man. Put it on your list. It's Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. You're going to love it, just knowing your background. But I read it because of just the whole COVID-19 thing. And obviously, Viktor Frankl was a Jewish man who lived through the Holocaust. He was one of the people who went into the German Nazi, like the concentration camps during World War II. And, he was a psychologist and he wrote about his perspectives. It's like, honestly, one of the, like a blockbuster book. It's sold millions and millions of copies. Like it's up there. Like on most people's reading lists, it's like, you got to read this book. But one of the things that he said is that he said a lot of interesting things, but basically one of the things he said is that when you're in such a crazy situation, like being in a Holocaust where all of your possessions have been taken away, you've been stripped down to basically nothing, you've been starved, you've watched people go through gas chambers, like all your family is dead, and you're just basically a slave in this ridiculous, crazy situation. That the only thing that really can get you through that is hope and purpose in your future. If you don't, and what he found is that if a person lost that, the present became so meaningless and so painful that they died. Like the suffering of the moment became meaningless and unbearable, and so they died. And so like what Frankl noticed is that a lot of people had hope in a specific future date. Like they're like, we're going to get out by Christmas. And so they were putting their hopes in like this date, and then when Christmas would come and no one would, they wouldn't get let out, the death rates would spike between between Christmas and New Year's, because they lost that hope. Like all of a sudden and so, I just think it's interesting that you had hope and like this idea, because I had the same thing, when I was going through all of my crazy stuff, where my parents were going through all their stuff, I had the idea that I was going to go on a church mission. And so that idea, even though I questioned it to some degree, is what allowed me to bypass a lot of the stupid decisions that a lot of my friends were making in high school, doing extreme drugs, like all these things that were going on around me, which I could have easily just fallen into. I had the idea that if I go on a mission, I probably shouldn't do this stuff. And so that idea allowed me to get through a lot of things. And the idea of that idea or that hope in your future is what allowed you to transcend a lot of difficult experiences and then become transformed through them. So I just, there's a really good quote actually from Dan Sullivan. He's the founder of Strategic Coach, but he said that the only way to make your present better is by making your future bigger. Because with a bigger future, like something to strive for, then like the present takes on a new meaning. You can handle it. It has purpose. You can go through the difficulties. So anyways, that's what I thought about with your story.
Well, then let's dive into that just a little bit more then, because I know in the past, since 2010 in my life, and I'm sure in other people's lives, dude, I didn't become a pastor. So a lot of
you're not a pastor now.
Yeah, a lot of that purpose fell off, a lot of that drive. Then I went into the season of losing, around 10 to 12 close people in my life. And I lost purpose. I lost vision. The podcast has helped my life tremendously get back to some idea of purpose and calling. For people that felt like they've lost their purpose or don't know, how do they go about finding one and reinstituting one and reinvigorating their lives?
Let's dive into you a little bit and let's see if we can download this a little bit. Seriously,
perfect. Yeah.
What led you to choosing to do a podcast? You know what I mean? Let's just think about this for a minute. Because I agree that it's a goal. Just as a quick thought. So my younger brother, Trevor, since we've talked last, we actually did a straight up intervention for him because he was doing acid and stuff. And, he's been on drugs ever since my parents' divorce, honestly. So he's been doing drugs for almost 2 decades. But we did an actual intervention. He ended up agreeing, and a month ago, literally a month ago today, actually, I took him to a treatment facility here in Florida. Anyways, I visited him on Saturday, so 2 days ago. And I was talking to one of the guys at, there's all sorts of people in this treatment facility. There's people who are 23, my brother's 30, there's people who are in their 50s, There's only 14 dudes though, and 5 girls. So it's not a huge one. But I was only there for an hour. It was a 3.5 hour drive. I drove down, visited him for an hour. We did a little bit of workout, talked, we said a prayer together and just connected. And then I was leaving, and one of his roommates, or one of the people that was there, he's like, "You're already leaving? You've only been here an hour." I'm like, "Well, dude, I live up in Orlando." He's like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Plus I'll be back in 2 weeks. I want to give Trevor something to look forward to. So I'll be coming in the future. I'll be back every 2 weeks or so." He's like, "Oh, dude, we need something to look forward to." He's like, "Because for us in here, all we're doing is looking back. That's all we do all day is look back." Because a lot of those people, they're in a rehab facility and is all they're doing is thinking about their mistakes, thinking, what I mean? So it's we need something to look forward to. So with all that said, I'm just interested, what led you to ultimately deciding to do a podcast? And, because you did at some point make that decision. You said, "Oh, that's something meaningful that I could potentially do," or that, seems like something that I would enjoy. There were some events that led you to saying, "I think I could do this," or "I want to do this." And then it started to give you something to work towards.
Right. So once the pastoral thing didn't work out, well, let me even go back a little bit further. I was a senior in high school, getting ready to go to college, and I heard just randomly God say your first ministry will be in radio. And so what did I try to do? I tried to go work for a Christian radio station. And I did, not
Makes sense. Yeah. I think it's strategic.
Well, and what's funny about it is that, I wasn't a DJ. There was some potential there that I could grow into a DJ, but I was a board operator. I queued in and out, but I wasn't just like, I was a backup for the backup board operator. And so, which I didn't get a lot of work, but that was kind of cool. And then it just never really went anywhere. And I stopped getting phone calls. And then I just, kind of gave up on that. And then I heard about podcasting, and that became an idea. And then I was like, oh, that's what I'm going to do. So then I bought my board, I bought a microphone and some stuff. And then I sat on it for about 3.5 years or more.
So what did you do during those 3 years?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the thing is, I bought it. But here's the thing, though, is like, I bought it and I wanted to do that stuff then, but I didn't have the confidence. I didn't feel like, why should someone listen to me? Because I'm hurt, I'm broken, there's nothing, I don't have anything to offer people right now. And I believed that. I'm sure I had stuff to offer, but I had the story in my mind. And I was still studying on how to do podcasts and stuff like that. But what I realized is, one, it's almost as if I invested this stuff into my future, even though I didn't plan on using it right away.
Because you knew at some point you'd probably get to it.
Right.
Which is why you made the purchase, right?
Exactly. No, and then every time I saw it, it was just kind of that drawing.
I'll get to that at some point. Like it kept reminding you of your future self. You're like, I'm going to get there. Right now, I'm just not feeling it or whatever.
Exactly. No, exactly. And then I came across a podcast called the Mentee Podcast. And, well, let me back up even before that. So I pitched this idea to Kevin Miller, host of the Zig Ziglar podcast, where I was like, hey, your show is awesome. I love listening to it. I have an idea. You should bring a guest who listens, aka me, and you should have individuals do like kind of coaching calls where your audience gets to follow a specific person. Obviously, that's not your whole program, but that's just an extra thing that you do, not the podcast, but just something extra that gets to follow the progression of an individual, gets to see their journey.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And so I pitched this idea. He loved it. Tom Ziegler loved the idea. But what it came down to is they just didn't have enough time or bandwidth to try to create another show. And then I kind of got a little bit bitter and angry, because I felt rejected, even though that's not at all what happened. And I'm good acquaintances with Kevin, even to this day. But I allowed that to be like, oh, my idea is not good enough to do. Oh, that's, and so here was this great idea, and then it just didn't happen. And the reason why I painted that idea is because me as the listener to the Ziglar show, I was like, wow, these people are awesome that, they're arrived, they're accomplished. And I'm picking up nuggets. But I realized there's this disconnect between someone
a distance potentially, right? From like where they are as their arrived self versus you and wanting to become that person.
Right. And I was just like, I just wish there was someone I could listen to and follow their journey and see how they do it and maybe model that. And then I came across this podcast called the Mentee Podcast, and it is exactly that.
The Mentee Podcast. That's
the Mentee.
That's so cool.
Yeah, dude, it was. So the story is I reached out to the owner of that podcast because he actually kind of just stopped doing it and wanted to buy it. And then he told me the price, and I was like, oh my God, that's expensive. The most likelihood is failure. Like it was like $50,000 for the podcast. And I was just like, I can't do that. But we came to an agreement to where it would work. And then I started getting people, started doing interviews, and then I got the contract. And then the contract was, if something happens and it doesn't, it fails, then I can put a $50,000 lien on your house and take the podcast back. And I was like, no way, I'm not doing that. I think he just trusted the lawyer to make it fair, and his lawyer didn't. I don't know. But at that point in time, I just realized I've already started the process of recording. I've already been emboldened. He kind of already showed me the format by his podcast and me following it for a while. And then I just kind of ran with it and said, you know what? I actually believe in myself now. And so even though I wanted the Mentee and it didn't work, I moved on to this one. And I'm really glad I didn't take it on, because by the time I was going to buy it, it hadn't been going for a year. And so that would be really hard to come
real
back
quick,
from.
what was the thing that led you to believing in yourself? Just so that your listeners have that nugget. Because you went from not believing in yourself, being depressed with that rejection, to believing in yourself, and then having like a format or a framework or something that that gave you confidence or whatnot to move forward.
So several things. When I reached out to Michael Hyatt, Angela Duckworth, Shad Helmstetter, Jim Stovall, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, because you were one of the very first people I emailed, and I started hearing yeses to interviews. And I thought it was because of the name of the show and some of its success. But then I realized no one was looking up the show that much, and it was all because of my genuine letter to them. And then it was at that moment that I believed I could do this.
So it was because you literally watched yourself do it and you realized you could do it.
Right. Yeah.
That's so interesting, because like that insight was available to you 3 years ago. You know what I mean? Like back when you were doing nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And trust me, I've had many long episodes of doing nothing. The reason I think this is so interesting is just because like that aha that you can do it, at some point is the thing that allows you to go on and go do it. Right. And the sooner you can get there with whatever you're trying to accomplish, even I still have this belief about you that one day you're going to become a pastor. I'm just saying it. You might not, but I think that eventually you're going to go figure out how to go do that, or it's going to be the right timing or whatnot. But hope is something that I've been thinking about a lot. I'm actually literally working on a book proposal as we speak. So when this book comes out, which in the time of when we're talking, it comes out in like less than 4 weeks. Literally the next week, I'm going to present the next book proposal. Like me and my agent are working right now, and it's a lot about hope. But what's interesting about hope is that you can't, and hope and confidence are very similar. You know what I mean? Hope and, hope is actually the foundation of a lot of these things. Confidence, motivation. Hope is, if you don't have hope that something's possible, you won't actually even believe it or try it, or you won't be motivated. But you can't actually have hope or motivation without, to some degree, a goal, and also the belief that there's a path to achieving it. And so they call it pathway. There has to be a pathway to getting to where you want to go. And so what I'm hearing is that at some point you saw a pathway. Like you realized that there was, a lot of it was just honestly pitching people and having them say yes. And you're like, oh, I can keep doing this. Like I actually can create this show, and I see that there's a way to do it. And so therefore I believe it's possible.
Yeah, you're right. Because I had this idea that I don't know if I could create content week after week after week. But dude, I have probably 20 shows in the pipeline. Like I have a reservoir full of shows still, and I still have recordings that I'm doing. And I'm just like, oh my God, like this part isn't normal from what I'm hearing. A lot of people are struggling week to week to get guests. And I have I could go on a 4 or 5 month no recording and be fine. And I don't know, God's just really,
it's pretty amazing, dude.
Opened the doors. I'm just blessed.
It's awesome.
He's given.
You are being blessed for sure. I can see that. He's opening the way for you, and he's showing you that he's got a huge future for you, dude. That's what I'm seeing, is that you are being specifically blessed.
Thank you. And dude, so, and since the show, my life has changed drastically. There were things that I had been afflicted by for over 20 years that I've seen freedom in. Right now, I'm about 25 to 30 pounds lighter than when you and I last spoke. I'm no, like, even with soda, I've probably been addicted to soda for 25 years. And this year rarely touched this stuff. You know, I made the decision, just for example, for soda this year, you know what? I'm not going to drink soda for 1 year. And then what ended up happening is maybe I accomplished something, and I did really well for a while. Maybe I accomplished something. Maybe, you know what? I deserve a soda. And then I drink, and then I fall off the bandwagon for a few days, and I feel like crap. Not just for like, oh, I broke my 1 year goal, but what ended up happening was the reason why I made the decision to stop drinking soda is because the caffeine started negatively affecting certain ways that my body functioned.
Like what, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I'm not going to share it on the
Okay.
podcast.
The reason I say
you're
is
fine.
I'm interested in caffeine. Like I feel like I've had a semi-addiction to caffeine for quite a while, although it's not like it doesn't ruin my brain or my body, I don't think, but I question caffeine a lot. And so it's a conversation I've had in my head a lot.
Yeah, I'll share it with you after.
Okay.
But I'm not going to talk about it on the air. And, you know, it's made me bloated. It just didn't make me feel good. You know, I was overeating. And then I just came to the decision, well, what if I just not do it just stop the idea of 1 year, but what if I just stop soda? Like in general, I just make a change completely. What would my life look like? And once I made that decision, it's been a lot easier than trying to do it for a year. Because it went from, okay, I have to accomplish this in a year, to, no, this is just who I am now. And
I don't know if you remember the story in the book of Nate Lambert who quit sugar forever. Did you read Personalities Impermanent by chance? It's okay if you didn't. Okay, well, dude, what you're saying is perfect. It's a guy who was a former professor of mine, but now he's just a good friend. He's not a professor anymore. He's actually literally a real estate mogul. His name's Nate Lambert, but he's a guy that struggled with his weight his whole life. And essentially, he was asking me, Ben, you want to go, a year sugar-free with me? I'm going refined sugar-free for a whole year. You want to do it with me? I'm like, and I had just heard my friend, a different friend, tell me that he had quit sugar for the rest of his life, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, Nate, you're someone who I know has struggled with your weight your whole life. If you're doing this for 1 year, what is that going to mean for you in a year from now, right? Like, are you just going to go back to who you were a year ago? Like, what's the point? I'm like, what if you just did this for the rest of your life? It would then remove the idea that you're going to go back to how things are. Like, it'll make your life so much easier. Because like there's this idea that, decision is a lot better than decision fatigue. Decision fatigue means like you're still not sure who you are or what you're going to do. So anyways, here's the thing though. When Nate decided, well, the thing that really pushed Nate over the edge was imagining his future self without sugar. So he said, because he had already imagined himself in the future as kind of being kind of like his parents, like in his 60s or 70s, being incredibly overweight, semi decrepit and stuff. Like that was just kind of like the future he had consigned himself to. Like in his mind, that was kind of the future he projected. Like, even though it's not what he wanted, he was just like, that's probably who I'm going to be. That's who my parents have been. And so, here was the interesting part was, Nate, who is your future self if you eliminated refined sugar for the rest of your life? Like if you just remove that one thing, how could you see yourself in the future? It's like, dude, if that was no longer part of my life, I could see myself being completely fit and living into my 80s and because he loved hiking and stuff. He's like, I could see myself avoiding a lot of the stuff that my parents had. And so the thing about sugar in his case is that sugar itself wasn't necessarily bad, but Nate with sugar saw a different version of himself in the future as he did without it. And once he realized, holy cow, me without this thing in the future has this totally different projected future. Why wouldn't I want that? And so he chose the different future self,
right?
Which now he's just he hasn't touched sugar for over a year and he just decided that's just not who I am anymore.
That's awesome.
So it kind of reminds me of your story to some degree.
Well, it's interesting because that kind of sets up my next question. And if it's the same answer as what we just talked about, we can skip over it. But there's this idea of pain versus pleasure and how we choose to make decisions.
Sure.
How does an individual go about from living a life in struggle one way to actually living life in a better way?
All right. This is how I answer this question in a few different ways. We'll see how we go back and forth on this. So my view of personality is that most people view it from a very pain versus pleasure perspective. You avoid what's painful. For example, if you view yourself as an introvert, putting yourself in social situations is painful, so you avoid those painful situations, and you do what's pleasurable, at least in the moment. Basically, the decisions are made based on emotions. Whereas if you're driven by purpose, you have a purpose that transcends your personality, then you stop making decisions based on what's painful or pleasurable in the moment. Because like psychology has kind of defined like 3 levels of happiness. Like the lowest level is just moment by moment, I guess, pleasure. The second one is more what they would call enjoyment, where you have a lot of what we call flow-based experiences, where you're immersed in experiences and you're having a lot of tangible, beautiful experiences, which create powerful memories. Now, the third level is what they call meaning, which is where you have a lot of those flow-based experiences where you're really absorbed in powerful experiences, but you're also driven by a bigger purpose. And so this kind of goes back to Viktor Frankl, honestly. So Frankl said, you need a sense of purpose for your future, and you need something to hope for in order to endure some of the challenges of the present. So the present becomes unendurable if you don't have a purpose to pursue. And if you have a purpose, that purpose from my perspective should be the thing shaping your personality. The purpose should be the thing driving who you become. And it would lead you to doing a lot of things that are painful, like stepping out of your comfort zone. Like I view your personality as your comfort zone. And so when you step outside of that and you start doing new things towards a future self, you're going to put yourself through a lot of uncertainty, a lot of failure, a lot of pain. That kind of, again, goes back to the idea, the bigger your future, the better your present. But that present is difficult. Like just as an example, like last weekend, as we're speaking, I had a huge catastrophic failure and I had a horrible weekend because I just kind of botched this speech that I was giving to this group that's really important to me. But I've already chosen to reframe it. Like it took some time and I had to talk to someone, and I had quite a horrible weekend. But in looking back now, again, you can either view the past in generally one of 2 ways. Either it happened for me or it happened to me. And I'm already choosing to realize, holy cow, that happened for me. And that was something that I can use if I choose to. I can either be defined by it and it can lead to a lot of negative situations in my future, or I can just say, that was huge. That was a big benefit. Even though it really hurt and it was kind of embarrassing, I'm going to choose to give it better meaning. And so the only reason I say all that is that sometimes if you're pursuing purpose and meaning, it's really not about pain or pleasure. It's really about purpose. And that allows you to make decisions based on your future self's preferences or based on your purpose rather than just your current self's preferences. Because often your current self's preferences, if they're based on pain or pleasure, are to the detriment of your future self. Sometimes your preference is just to drink a bunch of soda. Me too. But just because I'm pursuing a current preference doesn't mean it's actually good for my future self. And so it's better actually to make decisions either based on a purpose or based on what your future self would prefer. And that allows you to make better informed decisions here and now, even if in the moment they suck.
That's really, really, that reminds me a little bit of, who Angela Duckworth is? Yeah.
Love Duckworth's research. I actually applied to work with her and got rejected when I was going for graduate school. Yeah.
That's funny. So she was one of my first guests, and she said something similar in terms of like me. I have a personal life mission, and then she asked me the simple question, well, do you base your decisions in your life based off of that mission? And I said no. She goes, well, maybe you should start. And I was like, oh snap, that was good. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And I forget what she said because that's just so not natural. And then you're repeating it of your own accord, where we make decisions based off of the pain or pleasure in the moment. But that's a traditional view of personality as well, is that you should do that. You should just do what's innately comfortable to you. You should do, you should avoid your weaknesses.
But all of that makes no sense without the context of a mission or a purpose or a goal. The goal is what gives it context.
Quick question. Do you have to jump off right at 10, or do you still have a little bit of time after?
A little bit.
Okay.
Not much, though.
Okay. So how does, Jay, cut that last part out, okay? How does a person who doesn't feel like they have a purpose or know what one would be for their lives to define one, to have something to chase after?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say don't get enormously caught up in the huge picture. Like, I really think I like 2 to 3 year goals. You can have a huge amount of purpose for something that's like 2 years out. Even something as small as something that's like 6 months out, could be learning Spanish. It could be, getting in shape. You've got to just think about what is something that you already want that you can start actually seeing yourself in that position. So for example, where would you like to be as a person in 2 to 3 years? What would be cool, or what would be meaningful, or what is something you already want to do, but maybe you've been putting on the back burner, kind of like you with the podcast, for 3 years. Like, what's something you already know you want to do, but you're just not doing it right now? And how do you actually put that more to the forefront of your life? Well, you have to actually define it out. Think about what that looks like. Think about you actually becoming that person. Your purpose is something you choose, not something you discover. From my perspective, it's something you literally choose. You chose to be a podcaster, even though you were inspired to do so. It was a decision you did make. And so I just think, where would you like to be in 2 to 3 years from now, based on what you would either like to be doing or what you believe you could or should be doing? And then you start moving in that direction, and you actually will shift the goal as you're pursuing it, because you'll get more exposure, more clarity, more confidence. You'll realize as you go that actually I'm going to redirect it this way a little bit. But you need to have some form of direction. You need to start moving in that direction to actually start getting more exposure, because you're going to have to learn some things you don't currently know. Just as an example, between you and me, obviously for our listeners as well, when I got home from that mission experience, I thought I was going to write religious books. I just thought that was the direction I was going to go. And as I studied psychology and as I just studied business and self-improvement, I realized I actually want to write more pop culture books or more mainstream books. I may end up one day writing more directly religious or spiritual books, but I wouldn't have been able to know exactly what I'm doing right now 6-7 years ago. I had to actually start studying the craft and start getting exposed to things. And then I'm still writing books, which is what I initially wanted to do. That was the thing. But as you go forward, you get exposed to things and you learn things that you wouldn't have known before. And that allows you to clarify even further better goals. Right. And so I would just invite people to just think about, where do you want to be in 2 to 3 years? What would be really exciting or meaningful or purposeful to you? And start moving in that direction. That makes a lot of sense, especially going back to the beginning of our conversation. I had this idea that I'm going to get a degree in theology, and it's happening in 4 years. It felt long, but it was a purpose, and it was short term. It gave you something very specific to work towards. And we as people need a specific thing to work towards. It's impossible to have motivation and hope without that, as weird as that sounds. You need a specific future, and you need a timeline. Absolutely. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, that's all you need. For our listeners, in the context of the podcast, the Whole Person Podcast, in faith, family, finances, friendship, fitness, or fun, those are the areas that make up a person. So I guess based off of this conversation, pick an area that means a lot to you, or an area of struggle that you want to get better in, and write down what life that you want to live. And then based off of that, the purpose with it, and then work backwards on how that can become a reality. Because here's the thing, then my life has changed over the last year. I have $900 left in student loans from $10,000. When we lost a couple vehicles, we were able to pay cash. Our finances, after going through complete financial tragedy last year of 6 financial things happening, we made some decisions, and we have been so blessed because while COVID is going on and so many people are hurting, we're not struggling. But had we not made some decisions, now we've been making good decisions all along, but we made even harder decisions, that financial freedom
is very possible within this year for us to pay off all debt except our house. And that's just
Isn't that cool?
one example.
I mean, think about it. Your future, here's what's cool. Who you are today is fundamentally different from who you were a year ago before you had all this knowledge and confidence. Now, you're still many aspects the same guy, but you're actually also very different because you also see and project a totally different future and what's possible for you now, because you have that confidence and that faith that you can do things that your former self probably wouldn't have fully entertained or believed in. And so you actually are a different person than you were a year ago. And I give that same belief to all of your listeners that in the future, you will be able to realize things that right now just seem like dreams. Like it's possible in the future, for example, you could realize millions of dollars. Not that that may be your goal, because that's the place you get to in your confidence and also just in it could be in your faith, but it doesn't have to be. But like it's where you get to as a person in your situation and your abilities. I'm not saying that money needs to be the goal. I'm just saying it could be anything. It could be a brilliant relationship. You can get to a place where these things become normal.
So let me ask you this. How does a person get the most out of their life?
That's a deep question, dude. I think that
5 minutes, go.
I think that there's a few things to that. I do think that we do need to find a sense of purpose, not only for ourselves in the temporary, like 2 to 3 years, but we need to really find a bigger purpose. I think it has a lot to do with God and coming to a conclusion about how we feel about that. I definitely believe in God. I don't think that I could get the most out of my life without trying to learn more about what I'm supposed to be doing here. And so I think that requires openness, honesty, curiosity, learning, updating your sense of self, and you're updating your belief system, letting go of former views that may be limiting, for example, letting go of former views of who you once were. And so I just think, really how to get the most out of life is finding a sense of purpose or developing that sense of purpose and continuously updating that and learning and being continuously seeking for truth, and then hopefully integrating that into your life so that it impacts not only how you see yourself, but how you operate in the world. Just as one example, like I've got 5 kids, but I'm not, by the way, maybe since we talked, one on the way. Did I tell you that before?
Dude, air high five. Good job.
Bang. Yeah, we don't know the gender yet, but she's like 13 weeks along.
Dude, so we're going to
probably be our last.
Due dates at the same time, I bet.
So yeah, ours is close to like Thanksgiving.
Yeah, same here.
Crazy. Yeah, I think that just as an example, I'm not yet, from my view, the husband or father that I could or should be. And I think many of my priorities still need to be better oriented and could be, and I'm working in that direction. That's again why I like Carol Dweck's work, where it's like Carol Dweck is the one who did mindset and like fixed mindset versus growth mindset. What she found is that people who have a fixed mindset, they focus so much on who they are in the present, and that their present self is the be all end all. And again, this is what Dr. Gilbert said, which is in Personalized and Permanent, but Dr. Gilbert said, human beings are works in progress that mistakenly think they're finished. Mm-hmm. I just think the idea of your current self is so temporary, and this isn't the be all end all. Like what Dweck says is people with a growth mindset, they say, not yet. I'm not there yet. And that's okay. You have hope in the future and you're on the learning curve. And so, yeah, I think also part of having a good, meaningful life, or I forget even the question you had, it was actually better than that, is just continually being truer to the things, that you already believe. Right. Like I like the idea, I will be what I believe. And I'm working on that myself. I believe in the idea and in the concept of being a really better and just amazing husband and father. And that's something that I'm striving better to be on a daily basis. And it gives me a lot of purpose.
That's awesome. Well, I like to end each show with 3 questions, but since you've already answered these 3 questions before, I came up with new ones for you.
Nice.
And you might have already answered this first one already, but what do you want people to remember you for? Or as your work, you as a person?
Yeah. Really not even that much about me, but hopefully that I gave them something that they could use. You know what I mean? Like I don't really care how much people remember Benjamin Hardy per se, but I'm more interested in like, oh yeah, like when they think of him, they more think of like what I've hopefully allowed them to do. whether it's like he really helped me to do X, like he helped me to, pursue bigger goals or help me to let go of some things. Like I'm mostly interested in not how I'm remembered, but how their life has been impacted, whether it be by anything I taught or just hopefully how I could help support them.
Okay. What's the most important decision you've ever made?
Probably go on that church mission. That without that, I wouldn't have been married to my wife, wouldn't have done a lot of the things I've done today. So that was kind of a keystone decision for me, or just impact decision that changed everything else.
It set so many other dominoes in motion.
It was a first domino for sure, a big first domino.
That's awesome. What's the biggest regret that you've ever had or ever did, and how did that shape you moving forward?
Let's see here. I guess the one regret that I have, even though like it is what it is not having started writing sooner. When I got home from my mission, which is in like early 2010, like January, I probably kind of like you with the podcast for 3 years. I didn't end up starting writing for 5 years. I wasn't doing nothing. Like I was going to college. I was doing all sorts of stuff. And, but like I would have started right when I got home. That's something that, I felt like I was unprepared, or I wasn't ready, or I didn't know enough. And I think if I could go back, I would start immediately when I got home in 2010, even as going to freaking community college and getting my associate's degree. Like I would have just started in that world right then and there. And I'd be in a different place now. Who knows where I'd be now, but doesn't really matter. But that's probably the one major thing that I would do differently.
Awesome. Well, go ahead and Jay, take this part off, but go ahead and stay on after I end this real quick. Okay. Ben, man, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. Man, I love your work, your writing, you as a person. You're just really fun. And thank you for taking the time to hang out with us again and talk with us.
Pleasure, man. I love talking to you too, man. I love what you do. I love your perspective. So huge pleasure. Thank you, man. My honor.
Have a great day.
You too.
I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you would, I'd greatly appreciate you subscribing, as well as rating and even leaving us an objective review. It helps us with our ratings and spreading the message of the Whole Person Podcast. And now, may the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. Thank you guys so much for listening today. Take care and God bless.